episode 64 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. This week's guest is A.G. Riddle. Thank you to everyone that's gone over to iTunes and rated the show and left a comment. It has helped tremendously, and I do appreciate it. When you're doing your Amazon shopping, if you would go to hankgarner.com and click on the Amazon link in the right-hand sidebar and then shop like you normally would, that helps the podcast. We get a small commission on each of your purchases, and it helps us to keep the show going and to keep improving the quality. Also join us for a new podcast that we've launched, Two Book Nerds and a Microphone, airing on Fridays right here at hankgarner.com, where Ian Garner and I talk about books and book-related things that we love. The first episode is up. You can go check it out, and each Friday we'll post a new episode. Find all the archives for the Author Stories podcast and the Two Book Nerds podcast at hankgarner.com. Now on to A.G. Riddle. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. I'm very happy today to have A.G. Riddle on the show today, or as he's known, not on Amazon, as Jerry Riddle. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. I open the show every week by asking a form of the same question, and that is, how did you know that you wanted to become a writer? What is your first memory of wanting to tell stories and share them with the world?
Well, you know, I'm sort of different in that I didn't grow up wanting to be a writer. I kind of came to it late in life. I had a pretty successful career that I was very happy with for 10 years, and I was, I'd gotten to a stopping point in that career, and I was kind of like reflecting and trying to figure out what I wanted the next 10, 20 years to be about, and what I really loved was creating things. My old job was starting internet companies, and I loved the creative process. And the thing that brought me the most joy in my life was reading. I was kind of a bachelor at the time, and I loved science fiction. And I would come home every day from work, and I worked long hours on these startups. And that was the time that I was most happy, was reading. And so I thought, God, there's something. I love the creative process. I love reading. And I think that was kind of it for me. I mean, I'm 35. I'm 35 now. And I published my first novel 2013, March. And that one took me 2.5 years to write. So, yeah, it was probably 5 years ago. And I told my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, I was like, I think I'm going to write a novel. And she just looked at me like I was crazy. So that was kind of my first experience with it.
Well, in doing these mini interviews that I've done, there are some recurring themes that come up. Either the writer says, "Well, I've always just been a writer," or the other reoccurring theme is, "I've always been a creative person. I enjoyed the creative process and making things out of nothing." What was your first creative endeavor that lets you know that, this I may have something in me that other people don't have?
Yeah, I do think you've hit it. I mean, I really think those are the two drivers for every writer or creative professional in general. My dad owned a sign company, and my parents, I mean, one of the things that they instilled in us at a very young age was, that hard work is something that is a virtue and that's a value. And, so we worked in my dad's company. My grandfather owned a lumber company, and but my dad's sign company is what I really loved. I mean, these were like signs for, the big chains like Arby's and Exxon and Applebee's.
Right.
And, but it was also these little boutique restaurants and things like that. And I loved the concept, when the pastor of a church would come in and say, our congregation has, X number of dollars. This is what we want to create, and this is our vision, and this is what's important to us. And to go from there and you sketch some stuff out, and then you go into drafting and say, God, what will work engineering wise, and for like a site in downtown Asheville, this might work, whereas, you know, in Charlotte, this might work. So that was really cool for me. I mean, as a young kid, to see people talk about something in a room, and then 2 weeks later, somebody's welding it together, and a week later, you know, you're 120 feet off of the ground on I-85 putting this thing up with the wind blowing, which is pretty harrowing. I knew that I could never run my dad's company when I got up there. I mean, I was so scared of heights, and I was like, I got to find something else. But you know, very early, that kind of creative process was, I mean, that was just magic for me. It was magic for my dad, too. I mean, he loved it. He never really ran his company. I mean, his thing was like building signs, right? And he had people that kind of did the operations and the management. And a lot of it was true for me, you know, in the internet business. The thing that I really loved was when we were creating product, early stage stuff, and then, you know, after we launched and in beta phase, and then when we became a company and all that stuff, management and scaling, I mean, they're just things that didn't really interest me, and I wasn't really that good at them either. So it was just kind of like, well, what do you really want to do? And that became, you know, what can I do that's purely creative? And that brought me back to writing. But you know, I was very lucky in a sense of, you know, we're, for the first time in history, you can like write stuff and then put it on the internet within, you know, 24 hours. So I don't know if I would have become a writer in 1962, but
right.
I guess you're lucky when you're born, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, did you have an internet background? What type of, were you doing, like web-based apps, or what kind of stuff were you doing, without being too specific? But what were you building, interfaces, apps? What were you kind of doing?
We were doing primarily consumer-facing internet apps. That, you know, these were. We did a few B2B, like we did like, I don't know, 12 startups in 10 years, and like 6 bit the dust pretty quick, and a few took off, and one did pretty well. So we had a company that did a personal health record for military, for Army Reserve, National Guard, who were coming back from active duty that needed to transfer their records. And we did this, the last one we did was an aggregator for Groupon, Living Social. That kind of dates me because those things are cratered. But it was a roll-up thing where it, you know, sent you all the deals in your city, and we sold that. But yeah, it's nothing that interesting.
Gotcha. So
to your audience, I don't.
Well, you never know. You know, I think everything that gets you to where you are is interesting. I love to trace the steps back and find out what makes people who they are. You know, I think it's all fascinating.
You're a detective.
I guess so. I never really thought of it that way, but yeah. So what came first for you? Did you have an idea for a novel, or did you see this kind of publishing revolution and say, you know what, I've always thought I could write a novel, and now is the time to do it? Did you want to write first, or did the publishing catch your attention?
Yeah, well, I think what I really wanted to do, so, I mean, growing up in the household I did, having like a strong work ethic, I'm never really happy unless I wake up in the morning and have like a full day of work. I mean, this has been like, you know, it's a real asset, but it can be a real problem. Like, you can't take vacations. You know, my wife, she's not totally happy about this particular aspect of my persona, but you know, I gotta have something that I'm working on all the time. And you know, writing just seemed to kind of fit, because you can carry it with you for better or worse wherever you go, right? So I sat down and I was thinking, I'm going to write something, and I didn't really have any ideas, and I'd started going through everything that really interested me a lot, and human evolution and what we're learning about, you know, ancient hominids and Homo sapiens and our predecessors on planet Earth, I think is intensely interesting. And I think in our lifetime, I think we're going to unravel this huge mystery of where we came from. And that was kind of the seed for me. And I was like, well, you know, what's so fascinating for me about this whole puzzle, and it's that 70,000 years ago, the human race almost went extinct. I mean, we know that, hominids are millions of years old. I mean, we have Homo erectus bones that are like ancient. And, Neanderthals were in Northern Europe 500,000 years ago. I mean, they're all over the place. And we just found some bones in South Africa that are like very old. So, but our branch of the human race is only like 70,000 years old. And I was like, man, that's really interesting. Like, we're very new on the scene, and there's like 7 billion of us, right? And there's never been anywhere close to that kind of population. So, and genetically, we're very similar to these other, subspecies that have died out. And I thought, that's pretty interesting. What makes us so different from them? Why are there none of them, and there are 7 billion of us? And I mean, there's never been another point in the last, 4 million years in which there was only one hominid on the planet, right?
Right.
So that's really interesting. And I started thinking, well, what is that mystery? And that kind of process of research became the Atlantis Gene, where I married mythology with the science of how the human race hit this inflection point where we went down to about 10,000 total population, maybe even 1,000 viable mating pairs, and then just rebounded, and it's just like a hockey stick, straight line up, and just took over the entire planet. And which I do think is the greatest scientific mystery of all time that we're going to eventually unravel. But I just tried to spin a good tale around it, and I knew, early. I knew that I needed a really good scientific mystery because my writing was probably not going to be that good. So it's like, you kind of lean on the science or the plot when you can't develop characters. And I mean, I think I've gotten a lot better in 4 novels, but early I knew that I really needed to research, and I really needed something good.
Now, as someone with a history in internet startups, did the daunting task of getting into this very specific science, did that intimidate you at all?
Well, not really. I mean, I don't know if I've gotten a lot of emails that said I didn't get it exactly right. So that may be a point
so you
of
get those
debate.
Too. That's great.
A lot. But research was, part and parcel to my career. And I was very used to researching a market, kind of getting into it. And I don't think you can do it anymore with writing, but in internet startups, you do the best you can. You create that first version, you put it out there, and you learn all you can from people, and you listen and you reflect, and you say, man, what can we do better in the next iteration? And that's really what I was after with my first novel. And in a sense, I wanted to get better, but I also wanted to know if this was something that I should be doing with my time, right? Like, if the book didn't really go anywhere, I just decided, well, man, I'm going to go do something else. I like to write, but I was really looking for a second career. And, luckily for me, it kind of worked out, and I found an audience.
Yeah, I would say that you found an audience. I think that's a fair assessment. So you said it took you 2.5 years to write that first book?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was? Did you share that with anyone, or did you kind of keep it all to yourself and in hopes that it turned out well? What was your creative process like?
And my creative process was to shut myself off in my office for about 14 hours a day, and when my wife would walk in there, I'd freak out. I'd be like, "You got to get out of here." I didn't show her anything for like 2 years. She had to be very, very worried. Like, she was just like, is he having a nervous breakdown or some kind of early midlife crisis? And financially we were okay, but psychologically, I was probably not in the best place. Because when you're in your 20s, it's easy. I think it's a lot easier to start over, right? Sure, to switch careers, but I was in my mid 30s. The thing about having success is it kind of haunts you. Like, if you're good at something and then you go back to square one, to scratch, and you're starting over and you're learning something new, oh man, it's brutal. And I learned how brutal it was, but I was just really determined and committed to do it, or to at least give it my best shot. I created this thing that kept me sane, which is that, you know, I was going to write the best novel that I could. And if I was proud of it, I was going to put it out there and just see what happened. And I was just like, well, you know, if I'm proud of it, this is the best I can do. That's what I'm going to do every time out. And so, I mean, yeah, 2.5 years later, we lived in North Carolina at the time. We had a place in Florida that we'd go in the winter. And we were down there in the winter, and I was like, you know, babe, I've written this novel. I got my first draft. I want you to look at it. And she she obviously had her bathroom. She went there. She took a bath. She read this thing on her Kindle. I loaded it on there. And she came back, and I was stealing myself for rejection and all this. She said, I think it's really great. I think it's so good. And she has told me later that she was prepared to lie for the rest of our life. She was going to tell me that it was amazing and all this other stuff. But that was for me, to release something after so long working on it, it was excruciating.
I bet.
So that was my creative process, of secrecy and hiding from my wife. I don't recommend that to anyone out there.
Yeah. So you showed it to her. She obviously really liked what you were doing. Did she encourage you to keep at this?
She did. I mean, she thought I had some talent. You know, I think she wondered. I mean, I'd never written a short story or any kind of fiction. I mean, never written anything besides an email. I'm not on Twitter or Facebook personally, but she liked it. She thought it was pretty good. And my mom, she's an 8th grade English teacher, and is very, very smart. And she edited the novel for me. I was like, you know, Mom, I've got this novel. I don't know if it's any good. And she thought it was pretty good. She edited it. But, you know, for me, it was like, this is my mom and my wife. And this is not an impartial. These people are going to like this thing no matter what. So, I mean, the real test for me was putting it on Amazon and seeing what happened.
Now, your story kind of flies in the face of several sacred cows of writing and publishing. One of those is, that you need to write 1 million words before you're ready to publish. And you obviously didn't do that. You wrote this novel, and it was a really good novel, and it found an audience, and it was the first thing you'd written.
Well, I don't know. I would only add to that I think there's a lot of wisdom in the idea that you write a lot before you publish. I mean, I don't know that I didn't write 1 million words, before The Atlantis Gene came out. People think The Atlantis Gene is the first thing I ever wrote, but I wrote that novel probably 20 times. I would write it and throw this, the first thing I wrote, I was like, God, this is absolute crap. This looks like a 7th grader wrote it. And I was so discouraged and almost despondent. I was like, man, this really is bad. Even objectively, you psych yourself up, but the first thing I wrote was truly bad. And I threw it out, and I kept throwing stuff out and rewriting. And that was, at some point, the story down, and there's no more discovery, and you're just eating dog food. But, yeah, I wrote a lot, and I wrote that story. Even after that story came out, David Gatewood edited it for me. So my mom did the first edit. I published it. And then that summer, I got David to read it and edit it. And I re-released it in September. So I don't know how many times I've rewritten that thing, but a lot.
Well, and you had the benefit of having 2.5 years to work on it and to mold it and shape it and go through all the iterations. So, okay, I get that. The other thing you mentioned is that you were not on Twitter, Facebook, or anything like that. So conventional wisdom would be that, every writer needs to build a platform to then publish, to have an existing audience to publish to. What was your marketing strategy like when you got this finished book and you put it out to the world? Then how did you let everybody know that you had written this thing?
Yeah, that is the question. I basically had none. My only thing was, I'm going to write this novel. The one thing that I learned from my internet career is that your product is the king. I mean, remarkability is basically your only salvation in the world. I mean, it's there's this old saying, I don't know who said it, but advertising is the tax we pay for being unremarkable. And
wow.
we all have to advertise. I mean, I don't know who said it. It's not me, but like I advertise my books now, and I think we all have to. But it's like if you can really work on the product and you can make it the best you can, that's the win in your sale. I mean, that will really carry you to wherever you want to go. And that's what I was convinced of. I mean, I'd put kind of everything into writing and researching the story and all that. So, like, what I did to launch is that my wife put it on Facebook and said, my husband's written this novel, and you all need to read it. And she hounded people. I mean, she was so obnoxious. She was like, I'm going to lose friends over this. And, I mean, weeks went by, and nothing happened. And I was so, like, I was not in a good place after I released the novel because, I mean, I think the longer you invest in the novel and the longer you work on it, I mean, you get emotionally invested in it. It's like, I created this thing and I worked really hard on it, and you want to know that you haven't wasted your time and that what you've produced is something somebody wants to read. So, I don't know. It's tough for me to talk about marketing for the Atlantis Gene because that was March 2013. I think the world has kind of changed. I mean, I put that thing out there. I did, Kindle Select from day one, and I priced it pretty well. I ran some promotions, and it really found an audience. And it was my wife and her Facebook friends initially. I didn't even tell a lot of my friends that I was writing. They were really curious, and some really worried, like, what are you doing and what's happening with you? But I still think the moral of the story is right, which is that, if you can find a story that really excites you and an idea, and to write that as well as you can, I mean, I think people hate to hear that because it's like, that's not something you can implement tomorrow. It's a long road, and it's hard, and it's not a lot of fun, but I think it does work.
Yeah. Well, I think some of those early Kindle success stories, while they encouraged an awful lot of people, they gave people the motivation to know that, I can write this thing and I can publish it myself and I can find an audience for it. And some people are making lots of money doing this. I think those were valuable. But at the same time, I think it gave a lot of people the false assumption or false hope that, I'm just going to create this thing and put it up there and then I'm going to be, wealthy from now on. And they don't, as with a lot of things online, we don't get the whole picture. We see the successes, but we don't see all of the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it behind the scenes, and the waiting and the stressing out about it. And, we like to tout, how easy these things were, but they rarely are as easy as they seem.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. So you came up with the Atlantis Gene. It is a trilogy, the Origin Mystery Trilogy. Did you see this as a trilogy from the beginning, or did you just have the idea for the one book?
I had planned a longer story. I mean, I don't know. I always think big. I mean, it's been a problem and an asset, but I wanted to write a longer story. I didn't know how many books it would be. I didn't have enough experience to know. But I thought, I'll put the first one out there and see how it does. And if it takes off, I'll keep going. And I actually had a pretty good head start on the second one when the first one came out. But yeah, I had planned to do a series. I didn't know it was a trilogy at the time.
Since you published the first book in 2013, it's now 2015. That's been 2 years, and you just released your fourth book. So you obviously didn't have to spend as much time on the subsequent books as you did the first one. What was your project like? Your process like for following up that first book with the second?
Well, the biggest challenge for me after the trilogy was, what do I want to write next? And I had been planning a new trilogy, and I'm working on a new trilogy, but those things take so much. I'm doing another trilogy that's kind of like the Atlantis Gene. It takes a ton of research and a lot of planning, and I want this one to be kind of like Atlantis version 2. I really want to get a lot of things right, incorporate a lot of feedback, and I had this idea that was bouncing around in my head for a standalone novel, and I when it first came to me, I was like, oh, that's really kind of interesting, but I'm not going to write that. And as I researched more and more on the new trilogy, I was like, man, I really want to get back into writing. And I had the idea for the other novel was this plane that takes off in present day and crash lands in the future. I was like, God, that's kind of interesting. What's the reason? What's the backstory? And I got to just working on that almost out of fun. And my wife and I, we at the end of 2014, we spent 4 months in Europe. And I'd done kind of, like, before we went, I knew I wasn't far enough along in the research for the other novel, the other trilogy. So I was like, I need something that I can work on while we're over there, which, again, she loved. She loves it when I'm working in the hotel room, which she's out touring around Europe. But I was like, well, I could write this. This would be perfect. And, I mean, we spent, I guess, 115 days in 19 countries. And it was great because the novel is called Departure, but it is about, this plane crash in England. And, we went to a lot of the places that are in the book, which was really cool. And I had finished it before we left for Europe, but a lot of it was really based on, the great thing about writing is it can really kind of become a lifestyle business for you if you get it off the ground, which is not easy. But Departure was something that I could very much write on the road, and I could still, every day I was still doing my research for the other trilogy, but I was getting to write every day, which I think is important. And it's not always easy, but that's kind of how Departure came to be. I meant it as a standalone. I think it works pretty well that way.
But you plan follow-ups for Departure, is that right?
No, I think there's some interest, but yeah, I'm going to leave.
Okay, so the next trilogy you're thinking about is apart from Departure.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so in all of your books, you blend this very hard science with some kind of paranormal, some alien technology and different things like that. Is that something that interests you, that kind of some of the quasi-science? I don't want to say pseudoscience because that kind of sounds derogatory, but I don't mean it that way. Some of the speculative end of that. Is that something that really interests you?
Oh, yeah. Very much. What I'm trying to do with the novels is, to blur the line between fact and fiction. In my childhood, the things that I really loved were like X-Files, favorite show. I love Star Trek: The Next Generation. Star Trek everything. But, the X-Files was kind of my favorite, and I love the sense of mystery and the idea that, God, this could happen. And you kind of look at your life in a different way, or you think, well, maybe he's onto something there. And by the way, I was at Comic-Con a week ago, and I got to see the early premiere of the new X-Files season, and David Duchovny and Chris Carter, and that was just amazing. Like, to come full circle like that from something from my childhood that really inspired me. But I think there's a lot of X-Files, aspects in the Atlantis trilogy and in the new one that I'm working on. And I'm a big fan of Ancient Aliens and those kind of shows. But I would say that I Want to Believe is like my favorite character. But and I think that's kind of the fun of the novels. It's like the characters are trying to figure out what this big puzzle of life is about, and we're surrounded by so many mysteries, and it makes for good fiction, I hope.
Yeah, and I think it makes for interesting conversation, and for allowing yourself to kind of dream through the what ifs is really uh, one of the novelist's greatest tools is, allowing yourself to kind of suspend belief a little bit and think what if. And X-Files, like you said, was fantastic for that. What about so you got a lot of attention for the first trilogy, and as a matter of fact, was the film rights were sold. What was that like?
Wow, I mean, it was surreal. The book was released in March of 2013, and nothing happened for a few months, and then it really started to sell a lot of copies. I mean, it was selling, I don't know, by June, July, 35,000 copies a month, and I was starting to get a lot of inquiries from agents and all these people. And I found an agency that I was really impressed with the name, and I thought they were really good. But I think that the thing I learned from that is that what I really wanted from my career was maybe not what they wanted, and it was not a good fit. And so I decided to end that relationship in September, October. And I didn't have an agent after that, but I knew that I wanted to keep self-publishing. I mean, for me, I think that, one of the things I'd like to say on the subject of writing is that you have to figure out what you want from writing. I mean, that you have to really define success for yourself. And, what is success for me might not be the same for any of your listeners. I mean, success might be paying the mortgage, or, writing a story that inspires some member of your family, or, hitting publish, or, whatever it might be. So, my goals turned out to be kind of not really what they were looking to do. So I didn't have an agent. And then in December, I mean, I continued to get a lot of movie inquiries, and, some were from studios that I researched and just decided they weren't a good fit. And then CBS Films, who is the motion picture arm of CBS Studios and CBS Network, they contacted me, and I don't know, we had a really good conversation, and I thought, well, this would be something that was interesting. We were in Florida, and in our neighborhood, there was this entertainment attorney, and he negotiated a deal for me, and I didn't even have an agent, and that was that. It was closed like a month later. So it wasn't like, I don't know, I don't think that's a very common path to Hollywood, but
Probably not.
yeah, but that's what happened.
What you talked about defining success, because I think that is something important to talk about. I think so many times success gets boiled down to dollars and numbers of copies sold, and that of course you need to pay the bills, but as a creative person, sometimes there's something deeper that you're aiming for, and knowing that your stories have connected with people a lot of times means more to a writer than than monetary compensation. Have you had any interactions with readers like that where they've said, "Man, your story really connected with me, and I appreciate you writing it"? Have you had any things like that?
Oh, certainly. I mean, those are the emails I really cherish. And I mean, early in my career, I would get, I'd have a folder where I saved these things. I mean, it was, after I wrote the first novel, I mean, it was really tough. I mean, it was very stressful because I was getting so much feedback. And when you're writing your first novel, it's like you don't realize all the problems with it, right? And I mean, for mine at least, there were a lot. And people would point out a lot of problems. And through the editing process, you learn, oh man, I should have done that, or should have done this. And at the same time, you're getting emails from people, and someone would say, hey, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and I read your novel, and it made the time just fly by, and I loved it. And those are the kind of things that really change your perspective, and think, God, somebody enjoyed this thing, and it changed some very small part of their life, and that there's some value in that for me.
Sure.
And I think I think it's like anything in life, whether you're dating somebody or you're starting a new job, you figure out what you want from this job. I mean, are you trying to become the CEO of the company, or do you want to work there and go home at 5 every day to be with your family, or do you want, to do this job for 4 years and hopefully go into something better, or go back to school or whatever. And I think that especially early in your career as a writer, one of your priorities has to be to learn and get better. And so I want to, it's like no matter how many copies you sell, if you're learning and getting better, I think that there's a ton of value in that. And I learned that from startups. It was like, inevitably the first thing you put out there is crap. It's the best thing you can create, but it's still a long way from where you want to end up. The Facebook that we use today is a lot different from the Facebook that Mark Zuckerberg launched at Harvard, and the same is true for everything that gets popular. Publishing has this reputation of you write this thing and that's the book and you put it out there, but we live in the digital age now. You can post an update to it and new people find it every day. You continue to make it better, and then you can release your next book in 3 months instead of a year or 2. So you have this opportunity of learning, getting better, and staying at it. So I don't see it as this thing like the Super Bowl where you win or lose and bam, that's it, and it's forever etched in history. I think you have to keep getting better.
Yeah, and getting that feedback from readers and seeing your book as a not a work in progress, but an evolving thing as you are able to update with digital publishing is something that you never could have done in the past. That's really an amazing thing, and it's so cool to see the writer grow along with their audience as you get feedback. That's pretty neat. Your new book, Departure, has been picked up by HarperCollins. What was you? How did that come about? That you decided to partner with them for this book?
Yeah, that was fairly atypical as well. I self-published Departure in I guess early December of 2014. I didn't tell anybody I was writing. I told it. All my fans thought I was working on a new trilogy, which I was. I was working very hard on it, but it just wasn't ready. It wasn't ready for prime time. And, I was making a lot of progress on Departure, and I ended up finishing it. And I was like, man, I can put this out there. And there's really no reason to wait. So, I launched Departure. It really caught on. People loved it. I really wasn't sure how it would do because it is a bit of a departure. It's a little different from Atlantis in that, there's a lot of research and there's a lot of science, but it's a very different type of novel, and a lot of people didn't like it. I think that's fair. But it did, found a pretty good audience, sold, 260,000 copies in about 4 or 5 months. And my agent, so I only have foreign agents. Danny Bear represents me in Europe, and Gray Tan represents me in Asia. And, I keep these, they always ask about how the new books are doing. I keep them apprised. And Danny, he had double knee surgery, and he wanted the first 50 pages to read while he was doing recovery. And he emailed me. It's like, I love this thing. And send me some more. I didn't have any more at the time, but I sent it to him. He really liked it, and he had a Hollywood agent, and he wanted to know if I was willing to let that guy read it. And I thought, well, I don't see any harm in it. And so he read it, the manuscript, and nothing happened and I didn't follow up, and he didn't follow up, and I didn't think anything of it. Nothing happened for 3 or 4 months, and then the book became popular, sold a lot of copies. But the Hollywood agent, meanwhile, had been shopping it, and people had been reading it. And then Fox, 20th Century Fox, gave us this preemptive offer. We had like 2 hours to decide. And, it was a pretty good offer. We went back and forth a few times, and we sold the rights. And so Fox told HarperCollins that they had bought the rights to the book.
To a book that was not finished.
Well, it had been out for a few months at that point.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think they had basically said, well, the book's really succeeding. It's finding an audience. They read it and liked it.
Gotcha.
They told HarperCollins, who read it over the weekend, and then they made an offer for the publishing rights. And I thought to myself, well, I've self-published it. I think my core audience has probably read it, and this is an opportunity to try to test out the waters with the traditional publishing, with putting the book in bookstores for people that have never seen it, and just to kind of see how that goes. I mean, I thought it was a good opportunity for me. And, we'll see how it pans out for both sides, and I do see it kind of as an experiment.
Well, it's so cool that we have so many people now that have these hybrid deals where they're self-publishing and going with the big five for these other deals, and that you as the writer are really in control of the situation because you're still self-publishing the Atlantis Gene trilogy, and hopefully that's the success that Departure has with finding a wider audience then also brings readers back to the first trilogy also, even though you've got a pretty huge audience for that. But that's pretty cool that you can leverage all of these different things to work to your benefit, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. So what are you working on next? I know Departure is going to release in the pretty soon, the Harper re-release, right?
Yeah, it comes out October 20th.
Okay.
In hardcover. Yeah, and it'll be in bookstores and all that good stuff. Yeah. Right now I'm working on, the new trilogy. I continue to research and write, and I have a ton of ideas. So I'm really excited about it. I mean, it's I still like writing, and I've had a lot of with reviews and everything else, a lot of kicks in the face, but I still, I think the determination of whether this is for you is whether you get up every morning and want to do it, and I still do for now. I mean, we'll see what the future holds, but I'm still hacking away at it.
Yeah. Well, that's one more question I want to ask you, and I asked this to a lot of different people to get different perspectives, but how do you handle that sort of criticism and rejection that you get from people? Because when you've got a book like the Atlantis Gene with over 10,000 reviews, you're going to find a section of the audience that just doesn't like you, that doesn't like what you do, doesn't like your genre. They buy your book anyway, even though they don't like anything in that genre. I've never understood that. Why people would subject themselves to things they hate, but then feel the need to review something that they don't like. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But how do you handle that, and how do you keep your chin held high and do it for another day after being kind of kicked in the face like you talked about?
Well, I think first of all, it's not easy. I think it gets a lot easier, but initially, I mean, there's really nothing like it. I mean, if you come from a background, I worked in an office, and we worked in a very intense environment, like internet startups. I mean, it's pretty stressful, but you can still sit in a conference room, and if someone disagrees with you, you can say, I don't agree with that, and these are the reasons. And then sometimes the reasons are rational, and sometimes they're not. I think we've all been in a place where it's like, this is my idea, and I don't want it to be attacked, and I feel like I'm being attacked because my idea is being attacked. And things get personal. I mean, at work,
right,
it always happens. But with writing, it's at least when you're beginning, it always all feels personal. It's like, because you become so invested in this thing, and it's like, this is my baby. I've created this. I love it. It came out of my mind. It's mine exclusively. I did this. And then someone is systematically destroying you on the internet. And you can't respond to review. I've never seen it really work out. I mean, or some people might be good at it. I can't. I've never been able to make it work. But, and the other thing is that I think that you learn a little from it. I mean, it's like, some people are right. I mean, in the criticism that they make is valid. Like, your work of art is inherently flawed, and it's not for everyone. right? And so sometimes what you have to basically come to is to say, all right, is that a valid piece of criticism that I can learn from and improve, or is that only going to hurt me, or is it something that just doesn't apply to me? Because as you say, it's not my audience, and the person that read that and read that review is not the person that book was intended for. And basically, you can write a book, and you have to choose you have to pick your poison in many respects. I mean, the book can only have one pace. It can only have one ending, or it can only, in terms of the science that it goes in, there's only one level of detail that it has. Like, the reader can't say, oh, I want this level of detail, so when I get to a detailed part on science, I want to skip ahead 3 pages. We're not there technologically. So it is what it is, and it's not going to please everyone. And so the thing that I've learned is that, I approach reviews, and it's not easy in the beginning, and I wasn't there in the beginning, but I try to say, well, is there something I can learn from that and get better? And I try to realize that a lot of people, I think, are we all have bad days, and we all have things that bother us in our life. And sometimes, you sit down at night to read because you want to escape from whatever is happening in your life, or you want to, bleed into this other reality and just get away from it all. And if you're reading something that's a total piece of crap and it makes you upset, you're like, God, I hate this thing, and you write this review, and you're just kind of, you're infuriated from whatever happened in your life, and you kind of take it out on this novel. And I think as writers, we all have to kind of realize that we, are the whipping boy at some point for somebody. And we've probably all been on the other side of the coin. We've probably all flipped out at, somebody for something at some point in our life, and this is, I guess, karmic payback or something. But I don't know. That's a long answer to say that if you're a writer out there trying to figure out how to get your head around reviews, give up. Because it doesn't make any sense, and hopefully something somewhere will help you become a better writer, and that's the best case scenario. But I still read them, and I'm still looking for that kind of stuff.
So you do read reviews? Do you? I know, like you said earlier, you should never respond to bad reviews. It rarely goes well, and there was a pretty big dust up on Goodreads a couple of months ago where a writer responded to like a 1-star review or something, and complained to the reader that they were damaging his overall star rating, and that was the worst thing ever, because then he got 25 pages of responses from people that just piled on.
Oh wow!
So yeah, it doesn't turn out well when you do that. But but that's wonderful advice. Weigh that against what you already know. Take what you can from it, and shake the dust off and keep going forward. We look forward to Departure coming out in hardback this coming week. Excited for you about that. I hope it finds a big, huge, wide audience. And any news on the film projects? I know those things can be kind of murky and nebulous and kind of flounder for a while. But is there any news to tell about those moving forward?
No, I don't have any. No real news. I have phone calls with them periodically, which I don't know if that's just to kind of keep me in the loop, but I've been very hands off and told them, if I can help, I'm happy to, and happy to stay out of the way. So no news there.
All right. Well, if you have any news, don't hesitate to come share it with us, okay?
Yeah, I certainly will. Well, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
And Jerry, thanks for taking time to come on the show and share a little bit of your story with us. I'll send everyone over to your website. Where can they follow you to make sure they're up to date on what's going on with you?
Yeah, I think just go to the website. It's agriddle.com, and there's an email sign up, or there's links to Facebook, Twitter, and Goodreads. I think my wife created an Instagram account. I don't know anything about it yet, so we have that as well. Okay. I'm told.
Gotcha. And do you send a newsletter out periodically to let folks know what's going on?
Not really. I'm the worst at keeping people up to date on what I'm doing. I'm almost like a spy living in exile. But I send an email, I don't know, once or twice a year, usually when I have a new book. So
Okay.
most people have forgotten
your
who I
wife
am.
posts, and your
when they
wife
get the
shares it
email.
with her friends on Facebook, right?
She does. That's the main. If you want to know what's going on with me, become friends with my wife. So, or don't.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks, sir. I hope you have a great weekend, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Hank.